Lucas Marshall, a rich and conceited man, accepted a wager that would greatly alter his life. He was accustomed to success in business and his personal life, thriving on rivalry. At a fancy party in New York, his good friend Jack dared him boldly, piquing Lucas's interest. Jack, with a sly smile, challenged him. "Let's see if you can succeed at this. Lucas, I bet you don't have the courage to marry someone outside your usual preferences." Lucas, known for dating attractive women, was surprised, but always wanting to prove himself, asked about the reward. Jack, with a playful grin, raised his glass and offered $1 million to the victor, with the condition of marrying the woman and staying married for at least half a year. Lucas, drawn to the competition and the money, quickly accepted. The woman Jack had selected was Chloe Richards, someone who didn't conform to typical beauty standards. Lucas didn't know her, but he saw it as another victory to achieve. A few days later, Lucas learned more about Chloe. She was self-assured, independent and headstrong, unlike the women he usually dated. This made him even more curious. Used to being the one in charge, he questioned how he would manage someone who wouldn't easily comply with his wishes. They first encountered each other at an upscale restaurant. When Chloe arrived, Lucas immediately saw how different she was. She wasn't fazed by the expensive surroundings or by Lucas himself. Instead, she met his gaze with unwavering confidence. "You must be Lucas Marshall," she said directly as she sat. "And you must be Chloe Richards," Lucas replied with a restrained smile, offering his hand. She hesitated briefly before shaking it firmly, demonstrating her resolve. "Let's be direct," Chloe started, speaking frankly. "I know why we're here. I know about the wager, the rules, and the agreement." Lucas was taken aback by her directness, but kept his composure. "And yet you still came to meet me?" he asked, intrigued by her motives. Chloe paused briefly before responding. "Let's just say I have my own reasons. I'm not unaware, Lucas. 6 months might. Though 6 months may appear brief, significant changes can occur within that time frame. If you believe you can influence or manage me, you are incorrect." Lucas grinned. Chloe presented a greater obstacle than he foresaw, increasing his interest. As their initial encounter concluded, Lucas grew increasingly fascinated by Chloe. She was unlike anyone he had previously met, demonstrating no fear towards him, which sparked his interest and even respect. Days went by, and Lucas pondered his next move. Accustomed to dominating, he now sensed Chloe possessed her own strategy. Their second meeting occurred at a basic cafe, a stark contrast to the luxurious dining establishments Lucas typically visited. Chloe had proposed the location, and a curious Lucas consented, wanting to comprehend her character and motivation for agreeing to what resembled a short-term marriage. Upon Lucas's arrival, Chloe was already present, enjoying tea with a serene smile. She welcomed him warmly, lacking the aloofness of their first encounter, yet maintaining her unwavering self-assurance. "I assumed you favored high-end restaurants," Chloe joked as Lucas took a seat. "Occasionally, it's beneficial to deviate from the norm," Lucas responded, attempting to appear relaxed, despite feeling somewhat uncomfortable. They conversed briefly, exchanging superficial information, but Chloe quickly addressed the crucial matter. "If we are proceeding with this arrangement, I need to clarify a few points," Chloe stated, setting her teacup down. "I am not interested in your wealth or lavish way of life." 6 months means 6 months. Chloe made it clear to Lucas that she intended to leave their impending marriage unchanged by it. Lucas observed her closely, believing her sincerity. Chloe was known for her decisiveness, and marriage, for her, wasn't a tool for social advancement. Lucas, intrigued, asked Chloe what she desired from this arrangement. She immediately replied that she wanted her autonomy. She stressed that, despite agreeing to this deal, she wouldn't be under his control, and her life would continue as it always had. Lucas, surprised but not displeased, smiled. He hadn't anticipated this response, but he was happy to grant her this freedom. For him, the marriage was simply a way to win a wager, and her independence wouldn't affect that. He agreed to her terms, confirming they would part ways after 6 months. Chloe scrutinized him, ensuring he was truly agreeable to her conditions. She had entered this agreement with a specific strategy and was resolute in seeing it through. While she suspected Lucas might attempt to control the situation, she was confident in her ability to withstand any such pressure. Their meeting concluded amicably, with both understanding their respective parts. Chloe would retain her independence, and Lucas would ensure the marriage remained a mere formality. However, as their wedding day neared, Lucas began to suspect that this arrangement might be more complex than he initially thought. The wedding itself was a cold, impersonal affair, resembling a prearranged business deal rather than a celebration of love. Lucas Marshall, with his calculated thinking, already believed he'd won the bet. He was sure the half-year would pass quickly, and Chloe, despite her stubbornness, would surrender to the rich life he'd give her. After the wedding, Lucas brought Chloe to his enormous apartment in the center of New York City, a symbol of his riches. The large windows showed the city's lights, and the inside was decorated with the priciest and finest things. He felt this luxurious place would be where he'd truly win Chloe over with his money and possessions. However, right away, Chloe showed she wouldn't give in. Inside the apartment, she stayed aloof and distant. She looked at Lucas, not with awe, but with resistance. 6 months. Lucas, not a day longer, she said strongly, looking out a big window at the city, unimpressed by the luxury surrounding her. Lucas grinned, feeling sure of himself. He was accustomed to women initially resisting him. Every woman in his past had eventually fallen for his charm and money. He believed Chloe would be the same. In the early days after they married, Lucas did everything to wow her. He gave her costly jewels, fancy clothes, and lavish vacations, hoping she would get used to the rich life, he said. But she disappointed him by rejecting everything. Chloe stuck to her simple, unassuming habits, never falling for the allure of wealth. "I don't need these things, Lucas," she'd tell him plainly. Lucas, used to getting his way, was very annoyed that Chloe wasn't easily swayed. Her peaceful resistance really bothered him. This wasn't just about winning a wager anymore. It was about his pride. He felt his power being questioned for the first time, and he needed to show Chloe he was the boss. He became more forceful in his actions. He tried to stop Chloe from working, telling her things like she didn't need the money now that she was his wife. When she refused, he'd make her wait for hours for meetings that weren't actually important. He messed with schedules and events to try and dominate her. But Chloe was strong and refused to give in to his tactics. This only made Lucas want to control her even more. Their relationship became very difficult, like walking through a field of hidden explosives. Little arguments would pop up during normal chats. Chloe was quick, witted, and shut down every attempt Lucas made to make her feel less than or controlled. One stressful evening, Lucas changed his tactics. He tried a softer, more emotional approach. He told Chloe he didn't understand her. He said any other woman would be thrilled with their lavish lifestyle, and asked what she really wanted. Until then, Chloe hadn't shown much emotion. But now she looked directly at him, with a fire in her eyes that surprised him. She told him she wanted respect. She wasn't a game piece for him to move around. She said he couldn't control her with money because money couldn't buy dignity or honesty. She finished by saying that while he might have lots of material possessions, he was empty inside. Her harsh words deeply upset Lucas. For the first time, he realized he might lose more than just authority over Chloe. She wasn't simply opposing his influence. She was breaking down the false image he'd carefully created, and that frightened him. No one had ever defied him like this. Chloe's ability to see past his money left him feeling vulnerable. Instead of retreating, Lucas decided to exert even more control. He schemed to separate Chloe from others, aiming to show her that she needed him. He blocked her professional opportunities, even ruining important events she planned. But Chloe was not easily scared. Each setback only made her stronger and more resolute. She maintained herself. Respect, refusing to be controlled by Lucas. One evening, Chloe revealed her own strategy. "You believe you're running things," she said carefully, "but you're unaware that I have my own plan. And when the time comes, you'll understand this situation is much more complex than you ever thought." Lucas was taken aback. He suddenly realized he might have misjudged Chloe. For the first time, he worried he might not win this conflict. Following weeks were incredibly tense, like a rope about to break. Lucas, obsessed with control, tried every trick to gain the upper hand. But Chloe remained unyielding. She was an impenetrable fortress he couldn't conquer. Each action Lucas took seemed to make Chloe stronger inside. However, as days turned into weeks, Lucas began to view Chloe in a new light. He didn't just admire her toughness. It was more profound than that. Chloe was accomplishing something unique, something no other woman had managed. She was making him emotionally vulnerable. This unfamiliar feeling made him uncomfortable and bewildered. For the first time, he thought of Chloe not as a wager or a rival, but as an individual he genuinely desired to know. One evening, following a fierce disagreement, Lucas was by himself in the spacious living room, gazing at the city lights through the large windows. The city's glow, which once made him feel powerful, now left him feeling hollow. He questioned why he felt this way. Chloe was simply a woman he had wed 6 months prior. She should have been merely a pawn in his plan. Nothing else, but the reality was that she was awakening something within him. He, a man who always mastered his feelings, was now being swayed. Chloe could see past his mask, and that left him feeling exposed. While Lucas struggled with these thoughts, Chloe continued her usual activities, appearing more withdrawn with each passing day, almost like she was anticipating something. Lucas sensed an unseen barrier separating them, a barrier he couldn't penetrate, and it bothered him. He wasn't sure if it was his ego or the fear of losing his composure, but something about Chloe attracted him in an unforeseen way. "You're different, Lucas," remarked Jack, his friend who had suggested the wager during a casual meal. "Usually, you'd have everything managed by this point." It appeared that this lady was testing Lucas in a unique way. Lucas gave a strained smile, unable to answer immediately. He disliked agreeing with Jack, but it was obvious something was different. That evening, Lucas returned home, resolved to fix things. He had to stop thinking about Chloe and remember their agreement was only a deal, nothing else. Entering the house, he saw Chloe on the sofa reading, totally oblivious to him. "Can we speak?" Lucas asked, ending the quiet that had become usual between them. Chloe looked up peacefully, shut her book, and looked at him with a tranquil but focused look. "Of course," she answered, as if expecting this conversation. Lucas sat opposite her, searching for the correct words. The strain between them was very noticeable. He understood he couldn't treat this marriage as just a formality anymore. Something was shifting, and he had to confront it directly. "What are we doing?" Lucas asked with a genuineness that even astonished him. "This began as a game, a wager, but I'm unsure what to believe anymore." Chloe watched him for a moment before answering. "I'm not playing, Lucas. I never was." Her tone was steady but meaningful. "From the start, I agreed to this marriage for motives beyond you. I don't care about the wealth or your power. I'm here for a greater purpose. And if you haven't grasped that yet, perhaps it's time to become aware." Lucas felt a pressure in his chest, like she was sharing a secret he couldn't yet understand. Anger filled him. "I know you have your secrets, Chloe. But what irritates me is the more I try to understand you, the more I realize I'm not in control. And I hate that he suddenly stood up, unable to stay still, as if the weight of that revelation was too much to bear. Chloe remained calm, watching his every move. She slowly got up and walked toward him, stopping just a few inches away. Lucas felt his heart race. "Lucas," she began, her voice low and soft. "This isn't about control. You've always lived trying to dominate everything and everyone, but with me you'll have to learn that. Control isn't always the answer. Sometimes things just need to be what they are." Lucas looked into her eyes, and for a moment he felt a connection he'd never felt before. It was like for the first time he was truly seeing Chloe for who she was, not as a piece in his game. "So what do you want?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. Chloe smiled a mysterious smile that gave him chills. "I want you to figure that out for yourself." Lucas, and with that she walked away, leaving him there alone with his thoughts. In the following days, the distance between them seemed to grow, but in a strange way, Lucas began to feel closer to Chloe than ever before. He was obsessed with figuring out what she was hiding, what her true intentions were. And at the same time, he felt like he was losing control of himself. He didn't want to admit it, but Chloe was changing the way he saw the world. And the very idea that she could be affecting him so deeply terrified him. The 6 months of marriage were almost over. But for Lucas Marshall, each day felt like an eternity. He could hardly sleep. The looming revelation he felt he was on the verge of discovering made his stomach turn. Chloe had become an enigmatic presence in his life. He thought of her not just as the woman he married on a bet, but as someone who knew something he couldn't grasp. The obsession to understand Chloe consumed him. He had tried everything to uncover the secret she carried, but each answer only led to more questions. Lucas hired detectives, dug into her past, and followed every lead he could. But everything seemed carefully orchestrated by Chloe. It was as if she was always 2 steps ahead, controlling the game from the very beginning. One night after a business meeting, Lucas arrived at the penthouse, later than usual. The balcony light was on, and there was Chloe sitting looking out over New York like a queen, overseeing her empire. He knew that tonight was when everything would be revealed. Lucas felt she was ready to tell him what he had been so desperate to know, but the fear of what he might hear made his throat tighten. He walked toward her, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. Chloe didn't turn around right away. The air was heavy, almost as if both knew something devastating was about to unfold. "I need answers, Chloe," Lucas said, his voice firm, though his heart raced. "I can't take this game anymore. You have to tell me the truth." Chloe sighed slowly and rose from her chair, turning to face him. Her eyes, usually calm and calculating, now shone with an emotion Lucas couldn't decipher. There was something new in her, something dark and fierce. The truth. Lucas, she gave a bitter smile, crossing her arms. Do you really want the truth? He nodded without hesitation. But the tension in the air grew with each passing second. Lucas braced himself for any answer, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to hear. You have no idea who I am, Chloe, began her voice, carrying a chill and coldness. You've always seen people as pawns on your chessboard. But this time, Lucas, you were the pawn I've been playing. This game from the start. Lucas felt a shiver run down his spine. The certainty he always had about being in control was beginning to crumble in front of her. He tried to speak, but Chloe didn't let him do. You remember the name Richards? She continued, her voice growing sharper. Of course. You don't. People like you never remember. My father owned a small company, one that struggled to survive, until you came along and destroyed it. Lucas stepped back, his mind raced, trying to connect the dots. What? Lucas stammered, confused. What are you talking about? Chloe took a step toward him, her eyes burning with anger and pain. My father, Lucas, he was an honest man struggling to support our family until you came along and took everything. You ruined him. Lucas, he lost everything, and it led to his death. Paused, her voice breaking for a moment before she continued, tears welling up in her eyes. My father killed himself because of your empire, yours success at any cost. The impact of her words hit Lucas like a punch to the gut. He stood there frozen as memories slowly resurfaced. There had been so many deals, so many contracts, so many lives affected by his greedy hands. He couldn't remember. Every company he crushed to rise to the top, but now suddenly it was all coming back to haunt him. Chloe. He tried to interrupt, desperate, but she raised her hand, stopping him. No, she shouted, her anger boiling over. You have no idea what you caused. It's not just about money, Lucas. It's about destroyed lives. You took my father from me, the only person I had in the world. And while you thrived, my mother and I sank into debt and despair. You lived your life in luxury, and we barely had anything to eat. Lucas was completely stunned here. Wanted to speak to defend himself, but no words came out. All he could do was stand there staring at her as the weight of guilt pressed down on his chest. But I planned everything, Chloe continued, her tone now more controlled, but still filled with resentment. When I learned about your bet, I saw my chance. I approached you on purpose. I accepted the bet because I wanted you to feel just a fraction of what I felt. I wanted you to know what it's like to be played, manipulated, and left powerless. Lucas felt his body tremble. He had always thought he was in control, always believed he would come out victorious. But now the tables had turned. He was the target, and Chloe, the player, was controlling the entire board. Chloe. Lucas began to speak, but his voice was weak. I didn't know you were no Lucas, Chloe interrupted, stepping closer until she was face to face with him. You never knew, because you never cared. You destroyed lives without a second thought. And now I'm here not to destroy you, but to make sure you never forget what you did. I want you to feel the pain you caused, and that pain, Lucas, will haunt you for the rest of your life. Chloe's words fell over him like a sentence. Lucas was faced with something he had never experienced before. The real consequences of his actions. The weight of guilt was crushing, and he knew in that moment he had lost much more than a simple bet. He had lost something he could never get back. Chloe stepped away, the silence echoing through the penthouse. Lucas felt his legs give out, and he collapsed onto the couch, speechless, with no answers. All that remained was emptiness. Chloe's revelation reverberated in Lucas's mind like a relentless thunderstorm. Every word she spoke shattered piece by piece. The world he thought he knew, the woman he thought he could manipulate, who he considered just a pawn in his game of power and bets, had just flipped their entire board for the first time. Lucas didn't know how to react for the first time. He was truly out of control. Chloe, however, didn't give him time to process after dropping the truth about her family's destruction and her father's suicide. She left him alone in the room, abandoned to his own guilt. Lucas stood there, motionless, the air in the penthouse suffocating as if everything around him was collapsing. He wanted to talk to her, to apologize, to explain the inexplicable. But the truth was no words came. How could he justify something so cruel, something that had caused so much pain in the days following her revelation? Chloe did exactly what Lucas feared most. She completely ignored him. Her presence was a constant reminder of his failure. She walked past him as if he were invisible, as if his existence was nothing more than a shadow at breakfast. She sat in silence, barely lifting her eyes. When he tried to speak, his words died in the air, unable to break through the wall she had built between them. Lucas, who was used to commanding the room, to being the center of attention, was now being ignored in his own home. The absence of attention was unbearable. Chloe spoke to the staff, handled her personal affairs. But with Lucas, it was as if he didn't exist. The weight of this forced silence was slowly destroying the man he thought he was. Chloe. He tried to call one morning as she prepared to leave. "We need to talk." She stopped still, facing away from him, adjusting her coat. The silence in the air grew heavier, and Lucas waited, anxious for some reaction. Any word, even one of anger, would have been better than the indifference. But Chloe said nothing. She simply walked out gently, closing the door, leaving Lucas with the echo of the sound in his mind. The pain of being ignored by someone he was beginning to see as much more than an adversary was something new for Lucas. He was used to controlling, to winning. But now, he was the one being manipulated, punished by silence and disdain every time she left him standing alone. The feeling of powerlessness grew, and that was just the beginning. Chloe didn't stop at silence. She began actively undermining Lucas's confidence in small, painful ways at work. He started noticing that important meetings were being rescheduled without notice. His business decisions were suddenly being questioned, and projects he had initiated mysteriously began to fail. He knew this was Chloe's doing, even if she never admitted it. Lucas felt her influence in every move, like she was pulling the invisible strings that held his life together. At home, things were getting worse. Chloe took on a stance of absolute disdain, deliberately distancing herself from any of Lucas's attempts at reconciliation. She stopped sitting with him at meals, avoided any conversation beyond the superficial. When he followed her trying to fix things, Chloe would respond with cold looks, as if his presence was a nuisance. One night, Lucas found her in the living room, reading a book. The scene looked peaceful, but he knew that moment of calm was a silent trap. He sat on the couch, trying once again to talk. Chloe. He began, his voice low, almost pleading. "I know I've done horrible things. I know I've caused you so much pain. But please, can we try to work this out? Can we at least talk?" Chloe slowly closed the book without looking at him when she finally raised her eyes. Her face was so cold that it made him shiver. "Talk," she repeated with a bitter laugh. "You think there's something left to say? You want words, Lucas. After everything you've done, words are useless." "I was wrong, Chloe. I know that." Lucas insisted now, getting up from the couch and moving closer, desperate for any kind of connection. "I would do anything to fix what I've done. I can change, I swear." She finally looked at him, her gaze piercing, as if challenging him to back up his own promises. "Change," she said, standing up slowly. "Do you think changing now will erase everything? Will it bring my father back? Will it fix the years we spent in misery because of yous we spent in misery because of you? No, Lucas, it won't. She stepped closer, and Lucas felt himself sink, crushed by the intensity of her stare. What you do now isn't for me. It's for you. You'll carry this weight, this guilt for the rest of your life. Lucas stood in silence for the first time. He realized there would be no easy redemption, no instant forgiveness. He wanted to fight for something that could be fixed. But Chloe was beyond any simple repair. In the days that followed, Chloe began to increase the intensity of her punishments. Lucas was met with looks of disdain whenever he passed her, and his frustration turned into desperation. He tried in every way possible to show her that he was changing, that he wanted to be better. But every attempt was met with indifference or sarcasm. One night after a disastrous meeting at work, where an important project had been sabotaged, Lucas came home to find Chloe on the phone. Laughing, he overheard fragments of the conversation and realized she was discussing his decisions at work. He knew it was her. Chloe was destroying everything he had worked for, but in such a subtle, calculated way that no one but him would notice. And she made him suffer in silence when Chloe hung up the phone. Lucas was waiting in the living room. He stared at her, his expression exhausted, full of repressed anger, but also pain. You're tearing everything apart, aren't you? He said, his voice low, but with an evident tone of frustration at work here. You're destroying my life. Chloe looked at him with an impassive expression, crossing her arms. Destroying your life? She asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm just giving back what you gave. Don't worry. Lucas, I won't ruin you. Financially, that would be too simple. I want you to live with the pain I want you to feel. Every little loss, just like I did. I want you, every day, to watch everything you built crumble and know that it's your fault. Lucas felt the ground disappear beneath his feet once again. It was a nightmare. He had always been the winner. Always the man who controlled other people's destinies. But now, he was the target of a cold and meticulous revenge. Chloe didn't want to destroy him all at once. She wanted him to suffer day by day, with every small defeat, every look of disdain, until he had nothing left but regret. Weeks passed, and Chloe continued to ignore and punish him. Lucas, once arrogant and confident, now wandered around the house like a shadow of his former self, trying in every way to earn a forgiveness he knew would never come. He tried to redeem himself, but his efforts were always insufficient. He was trapped in a cycle of guilt and pain, a cycle that Chloe controlled with perfection. But the worst was yet to come. One night, Chloe finally confronted him. This time with a coldness Lucas had never seen before. She approached him as he sat on the couch, exhausted and broken, and spoke the words that would haunt him forever. Lucas, you took something from me that I can never get back. She began, her voice calm but sharp. Now, I'm returning the favor, and you will live with that for the rest of your life. And with those words, Chloe left him there, with nothing more to say. She didn't need. The punishment was already in motion. And Lucas knew he would never be the same. Lucas Marshall felt trapped in a maze of guilt and despair. Chloe had succeeded in making him experience what it was like to be out of control. The weeks following Chloe's revelation had been unbearable. Lucas, no longer the confident, arrogant man who believed he had control over everything around him. Now he was a shadow, a pale reflection of who he used to be. With each attempt to speak with Chloe, he was met with cold stares, ignored and rejected her. Indifference was eating him alive. He no longer slept, unable to think of anything but trying to fix what he had broken. But the weight of the truth and the actions of his past made that path seem almost impossible. However, something began to change in Lucas. He realized that his words no longer held any value. Apologies meant nothing. Chloe needed to see genuine change, real transformation, and he was willing to do anything to prove it to her. He needed actions, not empty promises. One morning, Lucas woke up determined. He knew he couldn't simply ask for forgiveness. He had to do something different. The first step would be to give Chloe space. Shit. Needed to see that he respected her time, that he wouldn't pressure her anymore. But he also knew he had to show he was still there in subtle and meaningful ways. Lucas began to pay attention to the small things that made up Chloe's life. He observed her daily routines, her preferences, and her likes. Didn't follow her, didn't invade her space, but mentally took note of everything she loved: flowers, especially peonies, the smell of her coffee in the morning, always strong, no sugar. These details, once insignificant, were now the key to his attempt at reconnection. That same afternoon, Lucas went to one of the best flower shops in town and bought a bouquet of peonies. He wasn't going to give them to Chloe directly. He knew she'd reject them right away. Instead, he left the flowers on the kitchen table without a note, simple yet meaningful. He waited anxiously as she went out for a walk. When Chloe returned, she found the bouquet. She didn't say anything, but Lucas watched out of the corner of his eye, seeing the exact moment she stopped in front of the flowers. Her expression didn't change, but he noticed her pick up one of the flowers and smell it. It was a small gesture, but for Lucas it was a sign Chloe hadn't rejected them outright. It was progress. In the days that followed, Lucas kept up with these small gestures. He carefully set the breakfast table, making her coffee, strong just the way she liked it, and then left, making sure not to impose his presence. He left little things she enjoyed within her reach, always without forcing a meeting or conversation. Slowly, he was trying to show that he had changed, that he was trying to show that he was trying to show that he was paying attention, that he genuinely wanted to care for Chloe. But Chloe still wasn't giving in. She kept the wall between them, and Lucas knew breaking through that barrier would take time. Still, he wouldn't give up. He was committed to showing her that he was different, that he could win her back, but on her terms and with respect for the space she needed. It was on a particularly cold evening that things began to shift. Chloe was on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights. After hesitating for a few moments, Lucas walked over to her. He brought her a cup of hot tea, knowing she liked to drink something warm before bed. "Here, I thought you might like something hot," he said, keeping his voice calm, not pushing his presence. Chloe didn't say anything at first, but she took the cup, her eyes still focused on the city ahead. Lucas stood beside her, silent, just trying to be present without intruding. The silence between them was tense, but for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel unbearable. It was as if something was changing, even if it was barely noticeable. "Why are you doing this?" Lucas. Chloe finally broke the silence, her voice soft but firm. Lucas knew this was his chance to speak, but he had to be careful. He took a deep breath before responding. "Because I realize that talking doesn't mean anything anymore." He began looking out at the horizon with her. "My words don't matter. What I did can't be fixed with apologies, but I'm trying to show you that I'm changing. I want to be a better person, not just for you, but because I realized I need to be." Chloe remained silent for a few more seconds, still holding the cup of tea. The cold wind blew past them, but the tension seemed to ease a little. "You can't change the past, Lucas," she finally said, her voice softer than he expected. "I know," he replied sincerely, "but I can change the future." Chloe looked at him for the first time that night, and Lucas saw something different in her eyes. The hardness was still there, but there was a flicker of curiosity. She wasn't ready to fully forgive him. He knew that, but this was a crucial moment. He had touched on something she might want to believe in. In the days that followed, Lucas continued his small gestures, but now there was a different energy between them. Chloe still kept her distance, but she wasn't rejecting him as openly as before. She accepted the flowers, the cups of tea, and even allowed him to talk with her during breakfast, albeit briefly and on a superficial level. The barriers were starting to come down, even if only slowly, but the real test came one evening. When Lucas was about to leave for a meeting, he had dressed up ready for another business appointment when Chloe walked into the room with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Can you cancel your meeting?" she asked suddenly. Lucas stared at her, surprised she had never shown any interest in his comings and goings. Since their relationship had fallen apart, he hesitated, but then nodded, grabbing his phone, and donned, canceling the meeting without a second thought. It was the first time in weeks that Chloe seemed willing to spend time with him, and he wasn't about to miss that opportunity. They sat on the couch, a little distance between them, but for the first time the silence didn't feel uncomfortable. Chloe seemed thoughtful, as if she were processing everything that had happened over the past few months. "I'm not ready to fully forgive you," Chloe said, breaking the silence. "But you're showing me something different. I see that you're trying, and maybe that's the beginning of something." Lucas felt his heart race. He couldn't rush things, he knew that. But Chloe's words were enough to keep his hope alive. He knew the road ahead would still be long, but he was willing to take every step, if it meant earning her forgiveness. And maybe her love. The night continued peacefully, with the two of them talking about trivial things. But for Lucas, it was a victory. He was slowly rebuilding something with patience. Chloe was no longer an untouchable figure. She was starting to let her guard down, and Lucas wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating her again. Still, there was a shadow hanging over them. Lucas knew Chloe hadn't revealed everything yet. There was something she was still holding back, and he needed to be prepared to face it. But for now, the fact that Chloe was willing to talk was enough. The weeks that followed that, quiet even, were a mix of tension and hope for the first time in a long while. Lucas felt like he was making progress with Chloe. She no longer treated him with absolute coldness, but she also didn't fully open up. There was a hesitation in the air, a kind of waiting that kept him on edge. He knew he was being tested, and he was ready for it. What he didn't know was that something much bigger was about to be revealed. Lucas dedicated himself entirely to proving to Chloe that he was a chain-ed man. He canceled work commitments to spend more time at home, making sure to be available for her without pressuring her or demanding immediate answers. Small gestures, like making breakfast together or talking about trivial things in the evening, became part of their routine. Slowly, the ice between them began to melt, and Lucas noticed that Chloe no longer treated him with the same disdain. However, something still bothered him. Despite the progress, he felt that Chloe was keeping a secret. She remained reserved at certain moments, avoiding deeper conversations about the past or the future. It was as if she was waiting for the right moment to speak. But Lucas didn't know what that was then. On a quiet night, as rain lightly tapped against the windows of the penthouse, Lucas noticed a shift in Chloe's behavior. She seemed more introspective, more distant than usual, as if she was lost in thought. He tried not to push her, but his curiosity was eating away at him. What was she hiding? What hadn't been said yet? Finally, when the silence became unbearable, Lucas broke the barrier. "Chloe," he began, his voice low, almost fearful. "I know there's still something between us that you haven't told me. I can feel it." He looked into her eyes, waiting for any sign of her reaction. "Please, if there's something you're still holding back, I need to know." Chloe, who was sitting on the couch with her hands folded in her lap, took a deep breath, initially avoiding Lucas's gaze. The silence that followed was agonizing, but Lucas knew he had to be patient. He knew forcing anything now could undo all the progress he had made. Finally, she looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of pain and resolve. "You're right, Lucas," she said, her voice soft but heavy with emotion. "I've been holding something back, something I didn't think I could tell you until now. But maybe it's time." Lucas felt the air tighten around him, him. Whatever it was, he knew it would change everything. He leaned forward slightly, waiting for the revelation that was about to come, but also dreading what he might hear. Do you remember the company you destroyed? The one my father managed. Chloe began here, tone firm, but her expression showing deep pain. I told you that you destroyed our family, and that's true, but that's not all. You destroyed Lucas. Looked at her confused. What do you mean? He asked, his voice full of concern. Chloe lowered her eyes, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall when she finally spoke again. Her voice was quieter, almost a whisper. I was pregnant, Lucas. Those words hit Lucas like a crushing weight. He blinked, trying to process what he had just heard. But he couldn't believe it, what he whispered. Stunned, I was pregnant. At the time when everything happened, Chloe continued, her eyes still fixed on the floor. And when we lost everything, when my father was gone, the pressure and stress of it all, I lost the baby. Lucas felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. He could barely breathe. The impact of the myth. Revelation hit him like a punch to the stomach. Something he never could have imagined. The guilt he had already been feeling, that had consumed him for weeks now, seemed to grow even more. He had destroyed not just a company, not just a family, but also a life. Chloe, he tried to speak, but his voice was choked. I did know. I never could have imagined. She finally looked at him, and the tears she'd been holding back now streamed down her cheeks. Even with her face marked by pain, there was an undeniable strength in her. No, you didn't know, Chloe said, her voice filled with hurt and resentment, because you never cared to know you destroyed lives. Lucas, and you didn't even look at the people in your way. I lost my baby, and you went on with your life as if nothing had happened. Her words cut Lucas like knives. He wanted to do something, say something that could fix what he had done, but he knew that nothing he said or did would erase what Chloe had been through. I don't have the words. Lucas finally managed to say, his voice weak and full of despair. I know what I did is unforgivable, and I'll never forgive myself for it. But please, Chloe, I would do anything to try and make this right. Anything. Chloe watched him for a long moment, and the silence that followed was heavy. Lucas knew that nothing he said could bring the baby back or fix the past, but he was desperate to find a way to at least ease some of the pain Chloe was feeling. Finally, Chloe took a deep breath and closed her eyes as if making an internal decision. When she opened them again, her expression had changed. The pain was still there, but there was something else too, something Lucas couldn't quite identify. I don't know if I can forgive you, Lucas, she said honestly. What you did, what had happened, it was devastating, but she paused as if weighing her next words. I can see that you're trying, and maybe there's a chance that one day I can find a way to move forward, but it won't be easy. It won't be quick. Lucas nodded, feeling a mix of hope and despair. He knew the road ahead would be tough, but at least Chloe was willing to consider the possibility of a different future. I'll do whatever it takes, Lucas responded, his voice filled with determination. No matter how long it takes, I'll prove to you that I've changed, that I can be someone you trust, someone you can maybe one day forgive. Chloe looked at him, and for the first time, there was a small opening. It wasn't full forgiveness. It wasn't the end of all the hurt, but it was something. It was a beginning. We'll see, Chloe said. We'll see if you can. The silence that followed between them was heavy, but also full of possibilities. Chloe stood up and walked toward the door, leaving Lucas alone on the couch. But this time he didn't feel the same despair as before. He knew there was a long journey ahead, but at least now there was hope. The days that followed Chloe's revelation were transformative for Lucas. Every word she had spoken stayed with him, weighing heavily on his mind as he felt the guilt of all the pain he had caused. But instead of sinking into regret, Lucas decided that the pain and guilt would be his fuel for change. He didn't just want to win Chloe's love back. He wanted to become a man worthy of her respect, and the respect of the many people he had hurt throughout his ruthless business career that morning. Lucas made a decision he wouldn't just stand by, letting the past condemn him forever. He would start over, and the first step would be to repair as much of the damage as he could to prove to Chloe that he had truly changed. He began tracking down the families whose lives had been destroyed by his business dealings. His first visit was to the family of an old competitor whose business he had ruined years ago. He arrived unannounced, knocking on the door of a modest house in a neighborhood that was a far cry from the opulence of his own life. The man who answered the door was a stranger to Lucas, but the pain in his eyes was familiar. "I'm Lucas Marshall," Lucas said, his voice filled with a sincerity barely recognized in himself. "I'm here to apologize." The man stared at him for a long moment, disbelief clear in his eyes. "Apologize?" He laughed bitterly. "What's that going to change now?" "I can't change the past," Lucas replied firmly, "but I can try to help rebuild the future. I'm here to offer compensation to help fix what I destroyed over the next few weeks." Lucas continued his journey of redemption. He knocked on doors, met with families, and offered not just money, but his time, his effort to truly understand the impact of his actions. He began donating large sums to small businesses that had been hurt by his corporate maneuvers, setting up recovery programs to help other entrepreneurs rebuild. Chloe watched everything from a distance at first. She remained cautious. Observing how Lucas behaved, she knew he was trying to change. But forgiveness wouldn't come easily, however. As the days passed and Lucas showed a true transformation, she began to feel something new toward him, renewed respect and admiration. She hadn't expected he was changing, and he was proving that his words were no longer empty. One evening, Chloe was standing on the balcony, watching the city lights, when Lucas quietly approached her. He had just returned from another one of his reconciliation visits, and his expression was different, now calmer, more resolute. "How was it today?" Chloe asked, still looking out at the horizon. Lucas sighed a deep sigh that carried months of effort and regret. "Tough," he admitted, "but necessary. Every conversation, every apology, it's a step toward becoming a better person, not just for you, Chloe, for me too." She finally turned to look at him. There was something different in her gaze, too. The hardness that had always been there, the anger she'd held onto, seemed to have softened at that moment. She saw that Lucas was truly changing. He was no longer the arrogant man who had entered her life with a bet. He was someone fighting to be different, someone willing to fight for them. "I can see that, Lucas," Chloe said, her voice soft but firm, "and I want you to know that I'm ready to try. Maybe it's time we leave the past behind and build something new." Lucas felt a wave of relief that he didn't even realize he was waiting for. Those words meant more to him than he could have imagined. Chloe was willing to give them a chance, not as the couple forced together by a bet, but as two people ready to start over. As the 6-month marriage agreement came to an end, something surprising began to happen. Chloe and Lucas grew closer. Their conversations became less formal, less tense. They shared moments of laughter and connection, and slowly love started to blossom in a way neither of them had expected. They were no longer the distant couple trapped in an arranged marriage. Now they were two people rediscovering each other in a genuine, heartfelt way. One night, as the 6-month period was about to, and Lucas prepared a special dinner. He knew this moment would be pivotal. They had come so far, and he didn't want the marriage to end there. "Chloe," he said during dinner, his voice filled with a nervousness he hadn't expected to feel. I know our agreement is almost over, but I don't want this to end. I don't want us to end. I've fallen in love with you, Chloe, truly. And I want us to continue, but now as a real couple, no bets, no games. Chloe looked at him, surprised by the sincerity of his words, but also with her heart warmed. She realized she felt something for him too. Something that had quietly grown over the past few weeks. They had started as adversaries, but now they were in love in a deep and real way. I love you too, Lucas, Chloe said, her voice gentle but firm, and I want to try. I want to build something with you, but this time is equals as a real couple. Those moments were pure happiness for both of them. They had overcome obstacles that once seemed impossible, and now they were ready to move forward together. Months later, Chloe started to notice something different about her body. She felt nauseous in the mornings, something she wasn't used to. It wasn't until after a checkup that she was sure she was pregnant when Chloe told Lucas. His reaction was pure joy. He embraced her, laughing and crying at the same time. Everything they had gone through, all the pain and heartache, now seemed to lead to this moment of renewal. They were ready to start a new life together with a new family. On the way, I want to do this right this time, Lucas said, knowing exactly what he needed to do. I want to marry you. Again. But this time for real. Not because of a bet, not for any reason other than loving you and wanting to spend my life with you. Chloe smiled, her tears of happiness mingling with his. I want that too, Lucas, she replied this time. It'll be a real wedding, a fresh start. Their new wedding was an intimate celebration with a few close friends and family. No superficial glamour, no rush from business or bets. Just Chloe and Lucas, united by true love, ready to face the future together. Lucas knew he still had a lot to prove, not just to Chloe, but to himself and the families he had roamed in the past. But now he had something to fight for, a new life, alongside the woman he loved and the child they were expecting. And this time he was determined to be the man Chloe deserved, and the father their child would need. As they danced slowly at the end of the ceremony, Chloe rested her head on Lucas's chest and whispered, "Who would have thought it all started with a bet?" Lucas smiled. Who would have thought it'd be the bet? Lucas smiled, holding her close. Who would have thought it'd be the best bet I ever made? And with a future full of love, redemption, and hope, they were ready for the next chapter of their lives. What do you think? Did Chloe make the right choice in forgiving and marrying Lucas? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your opinion. Your participation means so much to us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more narratives like this. Thank you for watching.